Somewhere right now, someone is scheduling a meeting to discuss the outcome of the last meeting. HBR's Stop the Meeting Madness found that executives now spend roughly 23 hours a week in meetings. In the 1960s, that number was under 10. The operating assumption inside most organizations is straightforward. More meetings mean more coordination, and more coordination means more output. That assumption is wrong. A 2017 Harvard Business Review study of 182 senior managers found that 65% said meetings kept them from completing their own work. More meetings produce less of everything else. There's a principle at work here. Meetings expand to fill the time scheduled for them, even when the actual agenda could be resolved in a fraction of that time. A 30-minute slot becomes a 30-minute meeting, regardless of content. Most of what fills that time isn't collaboration. It's what organizational scholar Stephen Rokelberg, author of The Surprising Science of Meetings, calls the performance of management. Status updates delivered aloud to a room that could have read them in 90 seconds. His term for it is meeting as ritual display. The status update meeting exists not because it's efficient. It exists because it's visible. A manager who runs a weekly all-hands is demonstrably in charge. A manager who sends a Slack message is technically just a person with a keyboard. Here's where the audit sharpens. Bad meetings cost far more than organizations acknowledge. A 1-hour meeting with 12 people doesn't cost 1 hour. It costs 12 hours of collective labor, plus the recovery time bracketing each end. So why does the 12-person meeting exist? A 2014 study by organizational psychologists at the University of North Carolina found that over-invitation is the dominant default. Managers added attendees as a social buffer, not a functional one. The researchers named the driver inclusion anxiety, what most practitioners now shorten to meeting FOMO. Follow the incentive. Leave someone out who needed to be there. You face consequences. Include someone who didn't need to be there. They sit quietly and leave. The rational move, every single time, is to add another name. Each individual invitation is a perfectly reasonable act of organizational self-preservation. Collectively, those reasonable acts produce a calendar that's structurally impossible to work inside. MIT Sloan Management Review has documented this as a classic collective action failure, not a character flaw, but a design flaw. Here's a counterintuitive finding. For technical staff, engineers, developers, analysts, meetings are often not just unpleasant, they're redundant. A 2021 GitLab survey of over 4,000 remote workers found that the majority of developers said meetings recapped information already documented in tickets, pull requests, and changelogs. Yet, the meeting happens anyway, because the ticket system is legible to the people who built it. The meeting is legible to everyone else, and in most organizations, everyone else holds the budget. This is what most meeting reduction initiatives miss entirely. An unhealthy meeting culture isn't the disease, it's a symptom of deeper structural problems. Organizational theorist Henry Mintzberg documented as early as 1973 in The Nature of Managerial Work that meeting proliferation tracks directly with unclear decision authority, not with workload. When no single person owns a decision, the meeting becomes the decision-making apparatus by default. You can't resolve ambiguity with a memo if no one has the authority to send a definitive memo. So you book a room and hope consensus surfaces. Think of the recurring meeting as an insurance policy against organizational risk. It protects the organizer from the accusation of not communicating, not aligning, not including. The premium is everyone's afternoon. The payout is plausible deniability. Here's the paradox that should stop any auditor cold. A 2022 Microsoft Work Trend Index survey of 31,000 workers across 31 countries found that employees ranked unnecessary meetings as their top productivity barrier. Yet the same data showed total meeting time had climbed 252% since 2020. People complain about meetings. Meetings keep multiplying. The complaint and the behavior aren't contradictory. People dislike bad meetings while still depending on meetings for information, visibility, and social orientation inside a complex organization. Removing the meeting removes the problem and the solution simultaneously. Managers occupy a specific structural position in this system. Stephen Rogelberg's research at UNC Charlotte found that managers who hold more meetings are consistently rated as more engaged by their own supervisors, regardless of whether those meetings produce decisions. A full calendar reads as visible management. This incentive compounds as you move up the hierarchy. A 2016 study in the Academy of Management Journal found that senior leaders' attendance at meetings functioned as a status signal. Their presence elevated the perceived weight of the work. Their calendar fills, their direct reports schedule accordingly. Here's the twist: the meeting abolition crowd tends to skip. Rogelberg's research shows that formal, regular check-ins, when designed with intent, measurably improve team cohesion and engagement scores. The problem isn't the meeting. The problem is the meeting with no owner, no agenda, and no end condition. A well-structured check-in has 3 properties the average meeting lacks entirely: a named decision-maker, a specific outcome that ends the meeting when reached, and a default rule that the meeting cancels if neither condition is satisfied in advance. But recall the FOMO engine. Even a well-designed meeting with 3 necessary attendees will attract 6, because the other 3 have no reliable way to know they're not needed, and no organizational norm that makes exclusion feel safe rather than suspicious. And this is how meetings breed more meetings. Each meeting surfaces a new issue requiring follow-up. Each follow-up becomes a meeting. Each new meeting adds attendees who then schedule their own follow-ups. The calendar isn't filling by accident, it's filling by design. Zoom out to the organizational level. Bain & Company's 2014 analysis of a large U.S. bank found that a single weekly executive committee meeting consumed more than 300,000 hours of staff time annually once all the preparatory meetings were counted. That's not hyperbole. That's one meeting's invoice. That cost never appears on a budget line. Meeting time isn't tracked as an expense. It's absorbed invisibly into salaries already paid. No invoice, no approval process, no CFO reviewing the meeting budget. It's the one organizational expense that requires no justification. Some organizations have tested hard reductions. In 2023, Shopify deleted every recurring meeting with more than 2 people from every employee's calendar in a single day, what they called a calendar purge. Productivity self-reports rose. Within months, new recurring meetings had repopulated the calendar at comparable density. Shopify's purge treated the symptom. The underlying incentive structure, where over-inviting carries no cost and exclusion carries real risk, stayed intact. The meetings didn't disappear. They regenerated. The calendar is a pressure system, not a schedule. Structural change requires 3 things: explicit decision rights, so people know who can act without a meeting; a norm where declining an invitation isn't a political act; and a meeting cost that's actually visible, calculated and reported like any other operational expense. Here's what the cost calculations almost always miss. A 2023 study from the University of California, Irvine, found that it takes an average of 23 minutes to fully regain deep focus after an interruption. A day with 4 meetings doesn't lose 4 hours. It can erase the entire cognitive output of the day. This dynamic isn't unique to corporations. A 2019 audit of the UK Cabinet Office found that senior civil servants spent an average of 60% of their working week in meetings, a figure that had doubled since 2010. The report concluded that diffuse accountability structures, not workload, drove the increase. Which brings us back to the meeting scheduled to discuss the outcome of the last meeting. It exists not because someone failed to think clearly. It exists because the system rewards scheduling it and charges nothing for doing so. That's not negligence. That's a rational response to the incentives on offer. Next time your calendar is unusable, resist the instinct to blame the person who scheduled the meeting. Audit the system that made scheduling it the safest available option. The meeting isn't the problem. The meeting is the receipt. This audit is complete. The findings, as always, may be ignored.